I am a psychologist, and I'm also a UX researcher, and I balance both of those things very carefully in my life. And I started my own company, Ad Hoc Global, just at the end of last year. And I did this for very specific reasons. I'm going to take you through why. I wanted to look at human factors, but in this new realm of digital. So these slides that I'm taking you through are all my sort of pitch slides. So it's a way of getting to know me and how I would normally try to sell myself into companies. I think that social science is at the core of UX research. And so when I get on a UX team, this is all I preach and this is all I beat the drum about. And I think there are a few others in this room because I don't always have the luxury of speaking to researchers necessarily. So I hope that some of you are hearing me in a different way. If you're also social scientists, you can understand why this may be important. And it's for this very reason that the research methods that we use, that we learn in social sciences, can be applied quite effectively to the realm of user experience. And so I spend a lot of my time taking things like quantitative and qualitative research, but also some of the fantastic things we learn in terms of ethnographic research into the business world. And it's really bridging that gap between academia and the business world that I think is often a challenge, but it's a challenge that we can meet quite easily. At the end, it's worth it because this new world of human factors and relying on human factors will help us to have better products. Maybe not better products solely for the purpose of selling better products, but better products because they'll help people to have better lives. So there's something altruistic, I think, about it if you do focus on more ethical ways of doing research and more ethical ways of finding reasons why products can be improved. That's my little secret mission in the world. I studied something called CyberPsychology. Many of you probably have never heard of it, but if you Google it, there is a Wikipedia page. And there are quite a few people in the world who are getting degrees in this, so I have a master's of science in cyberpsychology. Most psychologists hate this field and try to destroy it whenever it appears in universities. But ultimately, it's psychology. We're psychologists, but we focus on interactive platforms as the way of communication. And we look at things like mind and cognition and personality. So one of the things I'd like to throw out is think of what image you use on Twitter versus what image you use of yourself on Facebook versus what image you use on LinkedIn. Think of all the photos that you see of people doing this, the selfies and the pouting, and the way that we are putting ourselves out there in this new digital world. All of this is a new way of self-presentation, a new psychological paradigm that's being developed by an interactive platform. So that gives you an idea of why I look at this world in this way. This is just a quick overview of some of the brands. The smaller it is, the less work I've done. The bigger it is, the more work I've done, or the longer that I've been there. But I'm very proud of a lot of the work that I've done. I've been fortunate enough to do in the UK. And some of the brands that I'm working on now are right around here. So this is what I'm going to talk about today in a way that can be shared in a public space. It won't get me into too much trouble by divulging trade secrets or other things that can get me fired or sued. Structured ways of working. My approach. So as I say, I'm a psychologist and a UX researcher. Try to map out what that actually means. I want to get you here, if you're the client. So I'm going to show you how all of the other things relate. Psychology, we know we can learn human behavior from that. Social psychology, we get social behavior. Cyber psychology, I think, speaks to this new world of digital behavior and the things that we do. Why you get upset when you send someone a text and they don't return the text in 5, 10, half an hour, a day is way too late. 2 days, you're an idiot, you don't use the internet or you don't use technology. But if you send an email, you'll give the person a bit more time to get back to you. If they take a week, it's okay, right? So we have these new ways of behaving, walking around and looking at our phones and not talking to each other, or waiting at a bar or a coffee shop and not talking to each other or being engrossed. All of this is affecting our behavior and what's acceptable and what we find acceptable. So today, given that background, I hope you understand why my talk on guerrilla usability is so very much focused on making sure that the research that you do is effective and thorough. And doing it in a lean world or agile world. These are the new buzzwords, which means we don't really have time to do research, so do it quick and dirty. Do quick and dirty research, do it really fast. Those are the types of requests that I'm getting, and that I'm also getting a lot when I hear new projects being pitched. We don't really have the luxuries to research, so how quickly can you turn it around? And so that's why I think guerrilla usability can be really helpful. This will be my case study for today, the current project that I'm working on, and the top secret site that sort of can't be disclosed and is confidential. So it's an e-commerce site for a big UK retailer. These are my constraints. Everyone wants Guerilla usability testing, but I'm on a lean UX team. That means that we do the bare bones. We throw out some wireframes, we throw out some high-level wireframes as we can for an entire process, but we're working in an agile development team. So the team wants to build it as quickly and as fast as possible, and we have to inform that immediately. And so all the work that I do has to get my team insight so that they can make decisions and we can make changes and adjustments. It's a massive constraint, but it's not unrealistic if you learn to do guerrilla testing and you learn to do it effectively and thoroughly. And so when people hear that in terms of a method and approach, they often think of like this big, bumbling guerrilla, like let's just get in there and let's just do it fast. I like to think of it more in terms of the true, authentic sense of the word that it's informal, but it's quite formal. So even though we put it together very quickly, it is a structured machine. It does work in a certain way. You can get out there and do things very fast, but you also do it with a lot of consideration and a lot of high-level organization. And I'm going to show you how I've done it. My first tip in capturing the data is that you will always need an accomplice. You can't ever do guerrilla usability testing on your own. Now for mine, I went into the actual retail stores whenever I needed quick data and quick turnaround because I had an automatic audience. I could get permission from the brand to go in there and use it, so I had an immediate audience. So I would just run to the store with the questions and the setup that I had. And I could turn that around fairly effectively. I didn't have to get recruiters and call people in. But I could never do that alone, so I'd have to grab someone from my team. If you have the luxury, grab 2 people from your team. Why? While you're talking and asking questions, someone has to capture that data and capture it accurately. That cannot be you at the same time. Especially if you're trying to say, hey, come over here, come talk to me. Hey, hi, how are you? If you're trying to do that on the street, it's just nearly impossible to do that on your own, and also then to capture the information. That person is also very good at helping you to recruit. But you see the people who do the charities on the streets, and you walk by them and you say nothing. So you're no different from that if you're out in some sort of public space. You have to have that open personality and not be afraid of rejection, because you're trying to just get people to come over and talk to you and do a quick bit of research for whatever reason, for whatever amount of time that you're hoping, but they have to say yes and be open to that approach. So you have to really get over that initial ego. It's a lot easier when you have someone there. That accomplice can also start up a conversation with you. That accomplice could be your friend who works in a building nearby, who can just come by and participate in that research so that other people see that you're not some big weirdo or something to avoid on the street. It's very, very, very helpful. But I would never try to do guerrilla research or anything like that out in the public domain on my own. They'll also help you to observe as well as to capture the information. So things that you may miss because you're interacting with that person, you're asking the questions, you're trying to create that organized method. That person who's your accomplice can also help you to capture that information. So lots of good reasons to have one, and maybe even 2. Simple lures. Why do I say simple lures? When I went into the public space offering people 5 quid or 10 quid, it got really messy. So I turned to this. I could gift everyone chocolate even if they gave me sucky answers. I could gift them chocolate even if they walked away after 10 minutes because it didn't matter. But if I promised them 5 quid and they came over and gave me crap answers, I'd have to still pay them 5 quid. If the store started helping me, people in the store, so workers in the store started helping me, and they're like, well, where's my 5 quid? Give them some chocolate. It's a much easier, currency. So yes, sometimes it may be appropriate for cash, and it really depends on how much time you're asking from people in terms of your usability. It's not always that much. But for me, walking around with a wad of cash and having lots of people in the public know that I was the woman giving out money was just not a safe place to be. So that was easier. It could be gift cards, it could be something else. But think about a simple lure that's also a safe lure for your public space. Time sensitive, so I was touching on this before. You won't have that much time, yours or theirs. I remember when we went into the first store the first time and I dragged someone from the team to go with me, we thought it would take, 2-3 hours, we'd be back in the office, we'd play back. It took the entire day to reach the numbers that we had hoped to reach. So it is a really time-intensive process. And you can't ask that much time of the people who are walking by. You have a couple minutes, you have a few minutes, so you just have to be aware of that. And be really respectful of people's time. And they walk by like, no, I've got the kids to pick up from school, no, I don't have time to do that, no. You're going to get a lot of that, so you have to convince them that it will be quick, and they may enjoy it, and that you're a really friendly person to talk to, and that, most importantly, that their insight will be really helpful to you in some way. Conveying that to them very, very quickly is also important. People sensitive. One of the conversations I had with someone who came up to talk with us at D&Q after the person who worked there helped to recruit her, started talking to me about how her husband had recently passed away. And I looked over at my accomplice and he was like, what do you say? You have to be aware that, you're talking to people, you're interrupting their lives. You're taking a moment out of their day, and you have no idea what sort of information they're going to disclose. But you still have to be a human being and respond to that, regardless of whatever bigger goal it is that you have there. So, and again, it's happened to me in another guerrilla testing, just walking around, people start sharing information. I think maybe it's that lab coat syndrome. I have no idea why, but it does happen. So just be aware, or they may just be having a bad day, but you're going to have to react to people's personalities and still be a human being yourself. So making sense of the data. So you're going out, you're grabbing all this information, you have your accomplice, and I'm also then going to say that you must make sure that you calibrate this information and have some sort of instrument. And you're saying to me, how do you do that? Aren't you just grabbing notes? Aren't you just doing it in some way that's fast? I think that's one way. That can be a helpful way, but when you get back to your office, you may not know what to do with all of that information. So this is what I did, especially since my accomplice usually isn't a person steeped in research, and if they are, they've done UX research, just the quick and dirty stuff. They haven't come from that social science background that doesn't almost allow them to behave that way. Sorry, I hope I'm not I'm getting all high on the academic. So I created this for him. We didn't really ask people their ages when we were out in public, so I told him just give me a decade. Are they in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, what do you think? At least it was the same person scoring it. He could take gender down pretty accurately. And while he could write down some notes about what the person was saying and responding, I wanted him to score it in some way that was meaningful. So that when we were done, I had a consistent score. Now, I can hear some of my past academics saying, you're trying to quantify qualitative data. I call it scoring and having some way to measure that information. But it will be very, very helpful to you when you try to make sense of this data later on. And it will also help you when you try to then give some weight to this data. So this is what happened from all of those interviews and quick interviews that we took. This is what it turned into for me. I turned qual quickly into something quant that had some meaning for me. And clearly, when we did well, it's all greens and high numbers. And when we didn't do so well, we have an issue, big issue with the reds. People just didn't get something that they saw. And so there were low scores there. That just makes sense. It's not really quant. It's not enough to be statistically significant. So this is how you can help yourself to play back the data to your team. And I'm going to take you through 3 things about playing back the data. No matter what you do with all that wonderful quant stuff, you're always going to need the quotes because that's what the client likes. They're going to want anecdotal quotes. So things that I got that day. A bit muddled, a little jumbly, colorful, the image is not bad, can't see enough of the kitchen. These things help the client to understand it in words that are authentic and a bit more meaningful. So you can't ever get away from the quotes as much as I talk about trying to quantify that. You then have to turn that into themes. So this is where you start now getting into some sort of analysis that gets closer to social science analysis. So for me, a big theme was clarity of call to actions and user-led organization of information. So for me and my team, we know exactly what that means. We have some issues there. We have to address that. We have to go back to the design and figure that out. So that's where you take all of those quotes and you turn it into something that's now, let me play this back, to a more business-focused audience. And then those themes have to drill down into business recommendations. So what do we actually do? Do we make the button bigger? Do we make it orange? Do we make it more prominent on the page? But we know that there's an issue with the call to action. And finally, propensity. So that's what I was getting at when I tried to quantify this information. It's really the likelihood of an issue or a behavior to occur. And I know this kind of gets dangerous because we're not talking about a statistically significant population when you're doing guerrilla testing. If you're getting 20 or 30 people, you're lucky. But you should be able to get from your data some indication of a likelihood of a behavior. So you're walking in there with clear questions, you know exactly what you're testing or you're asking questions about. It could be whether or not people understand an icon. You could be running around the office or going outside and talking to, just people on the street and saying, what does this icon mean to you? What would you think this icon meant if you saw it on a mobile phone? That kind of quick information. But from that, you should get some sort of likelihood of people to understand that. Okay? And we're on my last slide, in my last minute. I'd like to encourage people to use, I'm sure you know ACM and the digital library there, but there's this one article that I think is really great reading. I tend to start all my research, desk research, with just informing myself with what's already out there, what other scientists have done, what other professionals and colleagues have done in the industry. So I start with a bit of research, and then from there, I'm able to make my work slightly better. And that is it. I thank you all very much for your time.